Captain David Reyes felt the pull of Zillafren's strong gravity as his shuttle landed on the platform at New Crystal. He had been away for half a year, traveling to 3 different star systems for important meetings about mining deals. These talks were crucial for keeping peace between humans and the Zaylon people. David was excited to finally spend a quiet evening with Lyona. Maybe they could eat at that small restaurant that looked out over the Crystal Gardens, where they had shared many private talks. The person checking documents at the spaceport seemed worried and wouldn't look David in the eye as he checked David's diplomatic papers. The transport pod taking him through the city's bright streets had the same nervous feeling. Something was wrong, but David couldn't figure out what until he got to the main plaza. A large group of people had gathered around an old punishment post that stood in the center of the plaza. This was an ancient thing from Zillathan's rougher past that wasn't used much anymore. David's heart sank when he understood what he was seeing. Lyona stood tied to the post with traditional restraint cables. Her silver skin looked dull from being so tired, and her crystal-like face showed the kind of pain that went deeper than just physical hurt. She wore gray robes that marked public shame. A sign hung around her neck with words that made David's hands turn into tight fists. Species Betrayer. Day 2 of 3. The crowd talked among themselves in the musical clicking language of the Xylans. Their see-through eyes showed both disapproval and curiosity. Some pointed at Lyona with disgusted looks, while others seemed genuinely uncomfortable watching this public display. David pushed through the crowd. His human height made him easy to see above most of the gathered Zillathans. As people recognized him, the talking grew louder and more urgent. He could understand parts of what they were saying through his translator. The human. She loved one of them. Look, he's here. David. Lyona's voice was barely a whisper, but he heard it clearly despite all the noise. When their eyes met, he saw relief, love, and something that looked like an apology. You came back. Of course I came back. He reached the edge of the energy field that kept the crowd away from the punishment post. What happened? Who did this to you? Captain Reyes. The voice belonged to High Magistrate Corv, who stepped forward from the crowd with the careful dignity of old Zillathan nobility. His ceremonial robes showed he was the one who had given the sentence. You have returned at a very interesting time. I've returned to find the woman I love tied up like a criminal for reasons I don't understand. David's voice carried across the plaza, causing more whispers. Explain this, magistrate. Lady Lyona has been found guilty of species betrayal under the traditional purity laws. Evidence of her involvement with an alien was brought to the court while you were gone. Corv's tone was formally neutral, but David heard the distaste underneath. She was given the chance to end the relationship and accept minor social punishments. She chose instead to remain defiant. David looked at Lyona and saw the truth in her face. She had chosen this punishment rather than deny what they meant to each other. The purity laws, David said carefully, violate the cultural exchange agreements our government signed. Zillathan citizens have the right to form relationships with diplomatic personnel without legal trouble. The agreements protect diplomatic personnel from trouble, Corv corrected. They say nothing about protecting Zillathan citizens who choose to degrade themselves through alien contact. The crowd's whispers grew hostile at this exchange. David realized that many of them had come expecting to see him walk away from Lyona, to watch the human diplomat distance himself from the shameful Zillathan who had loved him. His next words would either prove their prejudices right or challenge everything they believed about relationships between species. Magistrate Corv, David said, his voice carrying clearly across the plaza. I demand Lady Lyona's immediate release. On what grounds? On the grounds that she is my intended mate, and I formally claim her according to the ancient laws of Zillathan bonding. The silence that followed was complete. Even the plaza's fountain seemed to quiet as hundreds of Zilithans processed what they had just heard. David had not only refused to abandon Lyona, he had just proposed marriage in the most public, legally binding way possible under traditional Zalon law. Lyona's eyes widened, reflecting the plaza's crystal architecture like stars. "David, what are you doing?" "What I should have done before I left," he replied, never taking his eyes off hers. "I'm claiming you as mine and myself as yours before anyone who cares to witness it." High Magistrate Corv looked shocked. "Captain Reyes, surely you cannot be serious. The ancient bonding laws haven't been used in over 200 years. But they remain valid, don't they?" David stepped closer to the energy field. "Traditional Zilithan law takes priority over modern laws when it comes to marriage and family honor. If I formally claim Lady Lyona according to ancient custom, her relationship with me becomes not just legal but sacred under your oldest traditions." The crowd erupted in shocked discussion. David could see the legal implications dawning on faces throughout the plaza. He had just turned Lyona's punishment into a constitutional crisis. "You would need her consent," Corv said weakly. David looked at Lyona, seeing decades of future possibility in her crystal features. "The choice is yours, Lyona. Accept my claim and we face whatever comes together. Refuse, and I'll find another way to get you out of this." Lyona was quiet for a long moment. Her silver skin reflected the afternoon light as she thought about the weight of what he was offering. Around them, the crowd waited for an answer that would change their understanding of love, law, and the courage needed to stand publicly for what you believe privately. "David," she said finally, her voice carrying across the plaza with crystal clarity, "are you sure you want to bind yourself to someone your people might see as alien, my people might see as a traitor?" "I'm sure I want to bind myself to the woman I love, regardless of what anyone else sees." His smile was visible to everyone in the plaza. "Besides, I hear Zilithan marriage ceremonies are beautiful." For the first time in 3 days, Lyona smiled back. 6 months earlier, David had arrived on Zalon Prime with specific orders: negotiate mining rights for rare crystals needed in human technology, maintain diplomatic courtesy with the species known for their pride and distrust of aliens, and avoid any complications that might upset the delicate political balance between their civilizations. He had managed exactly none of those things according to plan. "Your people's approach to getting resources is fascinatingly inefficient," Lyona had said during their third formal negotiation meeting. Her crystal fingers traced patterns on the conference table that somehow made her criticism sound like music. "Our people's approach to getting resources is sustainable," David had replied, trying not to stare at the way her silver skin caught the light from Zilithan's 2 sons. "We prefer long-term partnerships over short-term exploitation." How remarkably practical. Most species we've encountered think in terms of quarterly profits rather than generational impact. She looked up from her notes, those translucent eyes holding intelligence that made David temporarily forget his prepared talking points. "Tell me, Captain Reyes, do humans always plan so far ahead? Or is this unusual strategic thinking?" What followed was a 3-hour discussion that covered everything from economic theory to comparative philosophy. Both the human and Zalon negotiation teams looked confused as their representatives discovered they had more in common than either government had expected. The meetings became longer, the discussions more personal, and the excuses to meet privately more creative. David learned that Lyona was considered something of a rebel among her people for her interest in alien cultures. She discovered that his diplomatic posting had been motivated as much by curiosity about other species as by career advancement. "My family considers my xenological studies an embarrassing hobby," she confided one evening as they walked through the crystal gardens that surrounded the diplomatic quarter. The gardens were technically public, but the late hour meant they were effectively private. They tolerate it because my language abilities make me useful in negotiations, but they would prefer I focus on more traditionally feminine pursuits like crystal cultivation, poetry composition, and finding an appropriate Ceylon mate to produce properly traditional offspring. Her laugh held no humor. My mother has already identified 3 suitable candidates from acceptable bloodlines. David felt an unexpected stab of something that might have been jealousy. And what do you think of these candidates? I think they're perfectly adequate Ceylon males who would provide me with a perfectly acceptable traditional life. She stopped walking, turning to face him in the garden's soft, glowing light. I also think I would rather spend my life exploring the universe than cultivating crystals in my family's estate. They had been walking closer together over the past weeks, David realized. Close enough that he could see the subtle patterns in her silver skin. Close enough to catch the faint ozone scent that all Zilithans carried. Close enough to notice that she was studying his face with the same intensity he was studying hers. "David," she said softly, "may I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Do you find me aesthetically acceptable by human standards?" The question caught him completely off guard. "Lyona, you're beautiful by any standards. Even though my skin reflects light differently than yours? Even though my eyes are larger and shaped differently? Even though I'm taller than most human females? Especially because of those things." The honesty in his voice surprised them both. "You're not beautiful despite being Ceylon, Lyona. You're beautiful because you're uniquely, completely yourself." The kiss that followed was tentative, experimental, 2 different species discovering that physical attraction could transcend biological boundaries. Her lips were softer than human lips, with a faint metallic taste that was strangely pleasant. Her skin was cooler than his but warmed under his touch. When they broke apart, both were breathing harder than the mild physical activity warranted. "That was," Lyona began, "probably against about 15 different diplomatic protocols," David finished. "I was going to say worth the risk, but your assessment is also accurate." What followed were 3 months of the most carefully hidden relationship in diplomatic history. Secret meetings in David's quarters, quiet walks in deserted sections of the city, stolen conversations during official functions where they had to maintain professional distance, while every part of their beings wanted to be closer. Lyona proved to be brilliant, funny, and surprisingly rebellious beneath her formal exterior. She introduced David to Zilithan poetry that made him understand why their people valued precision of language, while he shared human music that made her cry with its emotional directness. "Your species approaches art from the perspective of feeling," she observed one evening as they listened to a string quartet David had programmed into his quarters entertainment system. "Ours approaches it from the perspective of mathematical beauty. But when you combine them, you get something neither species could create alone." "Like us," David agreed. They were careful, using diplomatic pouches for private messages, timing their meetings to avoid surveillance, maintaining perfect professional behavior during official functions. But love, David was learning, had a way of making itself visible despite all precautions. Someone had noticed. Someone had watched. Someone had reported. David had been off-world for exactly 16 days when Lyona was arrested. The trial lasted 3 days, during which she was offered multiple opportunities to end their relationship and accept minor social punishments. According to the court transcripts David had demanded to review, her response was consistent. "I will not deny love to please prejudice." Now she stood tied in the plaza, paying the price for refusing to be ashamed of something beautiful. She could have avoided all this, High Magistrate Corv was saying to the assembled crowd. A simple denial, a minor period of social correction, and she would have been free to make appropriate choices for her future. Instead, she chose to honor what we had built together, David said loudly enough for the entire plaza to hear. She chose integrity over convenience, truth over social acceptance. She chose degradation over dignity. Someone in the crowd called out. David turned toward the voice. She chose love over fear. And now I'm choosing the same thing. He looked back at Lyona, seeing strength in her posture despite her exhaustion, seeing love in her eyes despite the price she was paying for it. The ancient bonding laws require a formal declaration. High Magistrate Corv said reluctantly, "If you truly intend to claim her, I claim Lyona of House Thyleth as my bonded mate," David said in carefully pronounced Zilithan, the words carrying across the plaza with ceremonial weight. "I offer my protection, my devotion, and my life in service to our union." Now all that remained was for her to accept or refuse, transforming their hidden love into public commitment or ending it forever in front of hundreds of witnesses. The choice was hers, but David already knew what she would say. He had seen it in her eyes the moment he'd walked into the plaza, the same certainty that had made her endure 3 days of punishment rather than deny what they meant to each other. Some things their relationship had taught them both were worth standing for publicly, regardless of the cost. High Magistrate Corv's expression suggested he was facing the most complex legal situation of his career. Around the plaza, Zilithans whispered frantically as they processed the implications of what David had just proposed. Ancient bonding laws hadn't been used in centuries, but they remained sacred, unbreakable pillars of traditional society. "Captain Reyes," Corv said carefully, "the ancient laws you seek to invoke were created when our society was different. They predate our modern understanding of species purity and social order. But they remain valid," David pressed. "Traditional law supersedes modern statutes in matters of marriage and family honor. That principle hasn't changed, has it?" A new voice cut through the crowd's murmuring. "The principle remains absolute." Everyone turned as Princess Zara made her way through the plaza, her royal guard creating a path through the assembled citizens. The heir to the Zalon throne was younger than David had expected, with the kind of crystal beauty that marked the highest nobility. But her eyes held intelligence that suggested she understood exactly what was happening here. "Your Highness," Corv said, bowing formally, "I did not expect. You did not expect the royal family to take interest in a case that could redefine our relationship with humanity?" Princess Zara moved closer to the punishment post, studying both David and Lyona with obvious curiosity. How short-sighted. David felt the political ground shifting beneath his feet. Royal involvement could either legitimize his claim or destroy it completely, depending on Princess Zara's position on interspecies relationships. "Captain Reyes," she continued, "you invoke laws older than our current government to claim one of our people as your mate. Do you understand the implications of what you're requesting?" "I understand that I love her, Your Highness. Everything else is negotiable." Princess Zara's laugh was like crystal chimes. "Everything else is negotiable." How refreshingly human. She turned to address the crowd. "Citizens, you witnessed something unprecedented. A human invoking our most sacred traditions to formalize a bond with one of our own. This raises important questions about the nature of tradition, the meaning of honor, and the evolution of our society." "Your Highness," Corv interjected, "surely the modern purity laws take precedence over." "The modern purity laws," Princess Zara said firmly, "were created during a period of isolation and fear. They represent our people at their most defensive, not their most wise." She gestured toward David and Lyona. "Before us stands evidence that love can transcend species boundaries without diminishing the dignity of either party." The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some nodded approvingly while others looked scandalized by their princess's words. "The ancient bonding laws require 3 elements," Princess Zara continued. apparently conducting an impromptu legal lesson in the plaza. First, a formal claim by one party. Captain Reyes has provided this. Second, formal acceptance by the other party. Lady Leona has yet to respond. Third, recognition by legitimate authority that the bond serves the interests of our people. David felt his heart racing. He had assumed the third requirement would be automatic if the first two were met. Your Highness, he said carefully, how does one determine whether a bond serves the interests of the Zaylon people? An excellent question. Princess Zara moved closer to the energy field surrounding Leona. Lady Leona, you have endured 3 days of public punishment rather than deny your love for this human. What do you believe this relationship offers our people? Leona lifted her head, her voice carrying clearly despite her exhaustion. Your Highness, love between species proves that understanding is possible. If a human and a Zaylon can find common ground in the most personal realm, perhaps our peoples can find common ground in political realms as well. A diplomatic answer. But what does it offer you personally? It offers me the chance to be completely myself. Zaylon, but not limited by being Zaylon. Free to explore ideas and possibilities that traditional expectations would never allow. Leona's eyes found David's. It offers me partnership with someone who sees my curiosity as strength rather than embarrassment, my questions as valuable rather than inappropriate. Princess Zara nodded thoughtfully. And you, Captain Reyes, what does this bond offer humanity? It offers proof that we can be trusted with what your people value most, the well-being of those you care about. It demonstrates that human love isn't predatory or diminishing, but supportive and respectful. David gestured toward the crowd. Every Zilithan watching this knows that I could walk away without consequences. My staying, my claiming her publicly, proves that some things matter more to humans than political convenience. Interesting. Princess Zara turned back to the crowd. So this bond offers our people evidence of human trustworthiness, expanded possibilities for our own citizens, and a bridge toward greater understanding between species. Your Highness, Corv said desperately, the purity laws exist to protect our genetic and cultural integrity. Magistrate Corv, how exactly does Lady Leona loving Captain Reyes threaten our genetic integrity? She, that is, interbreeding could produce. Could produce what? Children who carry the best traits of both species? Citizens who understand multiple cultures intuitively? Individuals who could serve as natural ambassadors between worlds? Princess Zara's tone suggested that Corv was failing this examination badly. These sound like advantages, not threats. The crowd was definitely shifting now, David realized. Younger Zilithans were nodding approvingly, while older ones looked uncertain rather than openly hostile. The ancient bonding laws, Princess Zara announced, require that I determine whether this union serves our people's interests. Based on the evidence presented, I find that it does. She raised her voice to carry across the plaza. I hereby grant royal recognition to the bond between Captain David Reyes and Lady Leona of House Thyleth, contingent upon her formal acceptance. The plaza erupted in discussion, some cheering, some protesting, all recognizing that they were witnessing history being made. Lady Leona, Princess Zara said formally, Captain Reyes has claimed you according to our most sacred traditions. I have recognized the claim as serving our people's interests. Do you accept his bond claim? Leona looked at David, then at the crowd, then at the princess who had just transformed her punishment into an opportunity for social revolution. I accept, she said, her voice carrying across the plaza like crystals singing in harmony. I claim David Reyes as my bonded mate, offering my protection, my devotion, and my life in service to our union. The ancient words, spoken in formal Zilithan, carried ceremonial weight that made even the protesters fall silent. Then, by the authority of ancient law and royal recognition, Princess Zara declared, "I pronounce you bonded mates. Magistrate Corv, you will release Lady Lyona immediately." As the restraint cables fell away and David finally held Lyona in his arms, the crowd began to realize that they had just witnessed the first legal interspecies marriage in Zilithan history. "You realize?" Lyona whispered against his shoulder. "Our wedding ceremony is going to be rather anticlimactic after this." "I don't know," David whispered back. "I think we can manage to make it interesting." Around them, the plaza buzzed with the energy of social change beginning to unfold. But David was focused on the woman in his arms who had chosen love over safety, truth over convenience, and partnership over tradition. They had claimed each other publicly, for better or worse, and now they would face whatever came next together. The formal bonding ceremony took place 3 days later in the Hall of Ancient Traditions, with Princess Zara officiating and representatives from both human and Zaylon governments in attendance. What had begun as a public crisis had evolved into the most politically significant wedding in recent galactic history. David stood at the altar wearing traditional Zilithan ceremonial robes modified to fit human proportions, while Lyona wore crystal jewelry that had been in her family for 12 generations. The combination of human and Zilithan traditions created something entirely new, a fusion that honored both cultures while belonging fully to neither. This ceremony, Princess Zara announced to the assembled dignitaries, establishes precedent for future interspecies unions within our confederation. The bond we celebrate today proves that love between species can strengthen rather than weaken our cultural foundations. Ambassador Williams, David's superior, looked like he was still processing the diplomatic implications. The mining rights negotiations had been completely overshadowed by the constitutional crisis David's marriage proposal had created. But the resolution had actually strengthened human-Zilithan relations far beyond what any trade agreement could have accomplished. Dearly gathered, Princess Zara continued, "We witness the joining of two individuals who have chosen to build something new from the best of their respective traditions. Captain Reyes and Lady Lyona, please speak the vows you have prepared." David and Lyona had spent hours creating vows that honored both human and Zaylon concepts of marriage. Their words, spoken in both languages, created a ceremony that felt both ancient and revolutionary. "I, David Reyes, choose you, Lyona, as my partner in all things. I promise to honor your heritage while building our future, to support your growth while growing alongside you, to stand with you in public and private, in joy and challenge, for as long as we both shall live. I, Lyona of House Thyleth, choose you, David, as my companion across all possibilities. I promise to bridge our differences while celebrating them, to learn from your wisdom while sharing my own, to face whatever comes with courage born of our unity, for as long as our hearts beat in harmony." The exchange of rings, a human tradition, was followed by the sharing of crystal bonds, a Zilithan tradition, creating a fusion that somehow felt more meaningful than either custom alone. But the real significance of the ceremony became clear during the reception when younger Zilithans began approaching David and Lyona with questions about interspecies relationships, cultural exchange, and the possibility of their own cross-cultural romances. "Lady Lyona," said a young Zilithan woman whose shimmering skin marked her as barely past adolescence, "my family forbids me from studying human culture. They say it will contaminate my thinking. But seeing you today, you haven't lost your Zaylon nature by loving a human, have you?" "I've become more myself, not less," Lyona replied gently. "Love doesn't diminish who you are. It amplifies your best qualities, while helping you grow beyond your limitations." Similar conversations were happening throughout the reception hall. David found himself explaining human courtship customs to curious Zilithan males, while Lyona taught human diplomats about the subtleties of Zilithan emotional expression. "You realize what you've started, don't you?" Princess Zara said, joining them during a brief lull in the festivities. "A very public marriage?" David suggested. "A social revolution. 3 couples have already requested permission to formalize interspecies relationships under the precedent you've established. The legal department is scrambling to create new frameworks for mixed heritage families. The cultural exchange program is receiving more applications than they can process." Lyona smiled. "Are you saying our personal choice has political ramifications?" "I'm saying your personal choice has given others permission to make their own choices. Sometimes that's how change happens, one couple at a time, one public stand at a time." 6 months later, David and Lyona stood in the same plaza where their crisis had unfolded. But now it hosted a festival celebrating the first anniversary of the Cultural Integration Accords, legislation directly inspired by their marriage that protected interspecies relationships and established new frameworks for mixed families. "Do you ever regret it?" David asked, watching mixed couples dance to music that fused human and Zilithan traditions. "The public attention, the political pressure, the way we became symbols instead of just people? I regret that you had to see me tied to that post," Lyona replied. "I regret the pain it caused both of us. But I don't regret refusing to deny our love, and I don't regret the changes that refusal helped create." They had both received new assignments, joint ambassadors specializing in interspecies cultural relations, traveling to worlds where human-alien relationships faced legal or social challenges. Their marriage had become their career, but it was work they found meaningful. "Lady Lyona, Captain Reyes," a young voice called across the plaza. They turned to see the Zilithan teenager who had approached them at their reception, now walking hand in hand with a human exchange student. "We wanted to thank you for showing us this was possible. Thank you for having the courage to follow your hearts," Lyona replied. As the young couple moved on, David reflected on how their private love had become public testimony. They had claimed each other in front of hundreds of witnesses, transforming shame into celebration, punishment into precedent. "You know what I learned from all this?" David said, pulling Lyona closer as they watched the festival continuing around them. "What?" "Claiming someone isn't about possession. It's about commitment. It's about saying publicly what you feel privately, regardless of consequences." He kissed her temple, tasting the faint metallic sweetness that still made his heart race. "It's about being willing to stand with someone when standing with them changes everything. Even when standing with them means becoming accidental revolutionaries? Especially then," David smiled, watching human and Zalon children playing together in games that neither species could have invented alone. "Besides, I hear the benefits package for accidental revolutionaries is excellent." Lyona's laughter carried across the plaza, mixing with music and conversation, and the sound of barriers dissolving one relationship at a time. They had been bound by love, tested by society, and proven strong enough to carry the weight of change. Some bonds, they had learned, were worth claiming publicly, whatever the cost. And some love was strong enough to reshape the world around it simply by refusing to hide. 2 years after the plaza incident that had transformed their private love into public revolution, David and Lyona sat in their shared office aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony, reviewing case files from across the galaxy. Their work as joint ambassadors for interspecies relations had taken them to 12 different worlds, helping mixed couples navigate legal challenges and social prejudices. The Andromedans are requesting mediation for a human Andromedan couple facing family opposition, Lyona reported, her crystal fingers dancing across the holographic display. Apparently, the human's parents think their daughter is throwing her life away on an alien, while the Andromedan's clan believes she's degrading the bloodline with primitive genetics. Sounds familiar, David said with a wry smile. What's our approach? I thought we'd share our story, then facilitate family meetings using the empathy protocols we developed on Kepler Prime. Sometimes people just need to see that love between species doesn't diminish either party. David nodded, then looked up as their door chimed. Come in. Princess Zara entered, now bearing the additional title of Minister of Interspecies Relations, a cabinet position created specifically to address the growing complexity of multi-species integration within the Zalon Confederation. I have news, she announced, settling into the chair across from their shared desk. The Galactic Council has voted to adopt the Zalon model for interspecies relationship recognition. Your marriage is officially the legal template for mixed unions across 47 member systems. Lyona blinked. Our marriage is a legal template? The precedent you established, the frameworks we developed afterward, the integration protocols you've helped refine, it's all being codified as standard galactic law. Princess Zara's expression was both proud and amused. Congratulations. You're officially the most influential couple in recent galactic history. We just wanted to get married, David protested. And in getting married publicly, refusing to hide or apologize for your love, you proved that interspecies relationships could work. You gave other couples legal protection and social precedent. Princess Zara gestured toward their case files. Do you realize how many mixed families now exist because of the courage you showed in that plaza? David and Lyona exchanged glances. Their quarterly reports documented the statistics. Over 3,000 legally recognized interspecies marriages, 1,500 mixed heritage children enrolled in integrated education programs, and 12 planets that had revised their cultural purity laws to accommodate diverse relationships. There's something else, Princess Zara continued. The Galactic Council wants to establish a permanent institute for interspecies relations. They've requested that you two serve as co-directors. That would mean, Lyona began, a permanent base, a research facility, a training center for diplomatic personnel working with mixed populations. You'd be developing policy instead of just implementing it. David looked at Lyona, seeing the same excitement in her crystal features that he felt building in his chest. We'd be able to help shape how the galaxy approaches these relationships from the beginning. Instead of just cleaning up problems after they develop, Lyona agreed. 6 months later, they stood together on the observation deck of the newly constructed Institute for Interspecies Relations, watching ships from dozens of different species dock at their facility. The Institute orbited a neutral star system, accessible to all galactic civilizations but controlled by none. Remember when our biggest worry was sneaking around to avoid diplomatic complications? David asked, wrapping his arms around Lyona from behind. Now our relationship is a diplomatic solution, she replied, leaning back against his chest. It's remarkable how life evolves. Through the observation windows, they could see mixed couples arriving for counseling, diplomats attending cultural sensitivity training, and families with children whose heritage spanned multiple species. The Institute had become what they had hoped for during those secret meetings in the Crystal Gardens. A place where love could transcend species boundaries without apology or explanation. Dr. Reyes Thyleth, Ambassador Reyes Thyleth, came a voice from behind them. They turned to see Commander Sarachun approaching with a datapad. The vegan delegation has arrived for the Mixed Heritage Education Conference. We'll be right there, Lyona replied, automatically switching into professional mode. As they walked toward the conference center, David reflected on how their hyphenated surname had become symbolic of integration rather than confusion. Lyona Reyes Thyleth and David Reyes Thyleth, names that honored both traditions while creating something new. The conference was their largest yet, with representatives from 83 different species gathered to discuss educational frameworks for children with mixed heritage. David watched a Centran father talking animatedly with a human mother about their daughter's experiences in integrated schools, while across the room, a Zilith and Andromedan couple shared strategies for maintaining cultural connections with both ancestral worlds. Ladies, gentlemen, and esteemed beings, Lyona addressed the assembled crowd. Welcome to what we hope will be the first of many conferences focused on the practical realities of raising children who embody the best of multiple worlds. 5 years ago, David continued, interspecies relationships were considered anomalies to be managed rather than partnerships to be celebrated. Today, we gather not to debate whether such relationships are valid, but to determine how we can best support the families they create. The presentation that followed showcased research from across the galaxy, evidence that mixed heritage individuals often became natural diplomats, that diverse families produce children with enhanced cultural adaptability, and that communities with integrated populations showed increased innovation and decreased interspecies conflict. The question is no longer whether love can transcend species boundaries, Lyona concluded. The question is how we can build societies that support and celebrate that love. During the break, a young Zaylon approached them, the same teenager who had spoken to them at their wedding reception, now a university student studying xenoanthropology. Lady Lyona, Captain David, she said formally, then grinned. I wanted you to know that I'm graduating next month with a degree in interspecies cultural studies. The program exists because of the precedent you set. How are your parents handling your career choice? David asked. They're proud. It took time, but watching how respected you both became helped them understand that embracing other cultures doesn't mean abandoning our own. She paused. My human partner is graduating with a degree in Zilithan literature. We're both applying for positions here at the Institute. As the young woman moved on, Lyona squeezed David's hand. Do you remember what you said when you claimed me in the plaza? About facing whatever comes together. I remember. Did you imagine whatever comes would include accidentally founding a galactic institution? David laughed. I imagined it would include a lot more private time and a lot fewer committee meetings. The private time is worth the wait, Lyona said softly. And the committee meetings are changing the galaxy. That evening, as they finally returned to their private quarters, David and Lyona stood again on their personal observation deck, watching stars that represented dozens of worlds where mixed couples now lived openly, legally, and safely. Any regrets? David asked, echoing the question from years before. Only that it took a public crisis to make me realize how much I was willing to fight for us. Lyona turned in his arms, her silver skin glowing in the starlight. Everything else, the attention, the responsibility, the way our love became a catalyst for change. I'd choose it all again. Even the part where you got tied to a post for 3 days? Especially that part. It proved to both of us that our love was worth any sacrifice. She smiled, the expression more beautiful now than it had been in that first moment in the Crystal Gardens. Besides, it led to the most romantic marriage proposal in galactic history. Most public marriage proposal, David corrected. Same thing when you're claiming someone in front of hundreds of witnesses. As they held each other in the quiet of their private space, surrounded by the evidence of how far their love had rippled through the galaxy, David reflected on the truth Princess Zara had identified years ago. Sometimes change happened one couple at a time, one public stand at a time. They had been bound by love, tested by society, and proven strong enough to carry the weight of revolution. Their private devotion had become public testimony. Their personal choice had become galactic precedent. Some bonds they had discovered were worth claiming publicly, regardless of consequences. And some love was powerful enough to reshape the universe around it simply by refusing to hide. In the end, that was what claiming someone really meant. Not ownership, but commitment. Not possession, but the courage to stand together when standing together changed everything. 5 years later, the Institute for Interspecies Relations had grown beyond anything David and Lyona could have imagined. What had started as a single facility now had satellite campuses on 7 different worlds. The main campus alone employed over 500 staff members from 32 different species. David stood in their expanded office, reviewing the latest statistics. The numbers were staggering. Over 15,000 legally recognized interspecies marriages across the galaxy. 3,000 mixed heritage children born in the last year alone. 41 planets had completely revised their cultural purity laws. 23 new educational programs specifically designed for mixed families. "You're doing it again," Lyona said from the doorway, a gentle smile on her face. "Doing what?" "Getting lost in the numbers. Looking at statistics instead of seeing the lives behind them." David set down his datapad and turned to face her. After 7 years of marriage, she still took his breath away. Her silver skin glowed with health, her crystal features radiated confidence, and her eyes held the wisdom of someone who had changed the galaxy simply by refusing to apologize for love. "You're right," he admitted. "I was just thinking about how far we've come." "We have a visitor," Lyona said, her expression becoming more serious. "High Magistrate Corv is here." David felt a mixture of emotions at that name. The man who had sentenced Lyona to public punishment, who had argued against their marriage, who had represented everything they were fighting against. "What does he want?" "He asked to speak with both of us. Privately." They found Corv waiting in one of the Institute's smaller conference rooms. He looked older than David remembered, his ceremonial robes replaced by simpler clothing. When he stood to greet them, there was none of the formal stiffness that had characterized their previous encounters. "Lady Lyona, Captain Reyes," he said, bowing slightly. "Thank you for seeing me." "Magistrate Corv," Lyona replied neutrally. "This is unexpected." "I imagine it is." Corv gestured toward the chairs. "May we sit?" Once they were seated, Corv seemed to struggle with how to begin. Finally, he spoke. "I came to apologize." The words hung in the air. David and Lyona exchanged glances. 7 years ago, I sentenced you to 3 days of public punishment," Corv continued, looking directly at Lyona. "I believed I was upholding our most sacred traditions, protecting our culture from degradation. I was wrong." "What changed your mind?" Lyona asked softly. "My granddaughter." Corv's expression softened. "She's a student here at the Institute. She's studying interspecies psychology. And she's in love with a human man." David felt understanding dawn. "And you're afraid she'll face what Lyona faced?" "No," Corv shook his head. "That's the remarkable thing. She won't. Because of what you two did, because of the courage you showed in that plaza, my granddaughter can love openly without fear. She can build a life with the person she chooses without being called a traitor or a degrader of bloodlines." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the diverse crowd moving through the Institute's grounds. "I watched her yesterday, laughing with her human partner, planning their future together, and I realized that she has opportunities one never had. She can be fully Zaylon while also being something more. She's not diminished by her love. She's expanded by it." Corv turned back to face them. "I came to apologize for the pain I caused you, Lady Lyona, and to thank you both for having the courage I lacked. You changed our entire civilization because you refused to hide." Lyona stood and crossed to Corv. For a long moment, she simply looked at him. Then she extended her hand in the traditional Zilithan gesture of forgiveness. "Your granddaughter is fortunate to have you in her life," she said. "Many in your generation still cling to the old ways. Your willingness to change gives me hope." "The old ways," Corv said quietly, "were born from fear. What you've built here is born from courage. I know which one I want my granddaughter to inherit." After Corv left, David and Lyona stood together at the window, watching the evening light play across the Institute's grounds. "Do you think we've really changed things?" David asked. "Or are we just creating a bubble where people can pretend the prejudices don't exist?" "Both, probably," Lyona replied. "But bubbles have a way of expanding. Every couple we help, every family we support, every child who grows up seeing mixed relationships as normal, they all become ambassadors for change." "Speaking of children," David said carefully, "have you given any more thought to our conversation last month?" Lyona was quiet for a moment. They had been discussing the possibility of having children of their own, a complex proposition when the parents came from different species. Medical advances had made it possible, but the decision carried weight beyond just their personal desires. "I've thought about it constantly," she admitted. "A child who is both human and Zalon, who carries both our heritages, who would be living proof that love can literally create something new." "But," David prompted, hearing the hesitation in her voice, "but I'm afraid. What if our child faces prejudices we can't protect them from? What if they feel like they don't fully belong to either species? What if we've changed the laws but not people's hearts?" David turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Remember what you told that young woman at our wedding reception? That love doesn't diminish who you are. It amplifies your best qualities while helping you grow beyond your limitations. That was about individuals, not children. It's about possibility," David said. "Yes, our child might face challenges, but they'll also have opportunities no one else has. They'll be a bridge between two worlds. They'll understand both cultures instinctively. And they'll have us, two parents who fought against an entire society to be together. If we can face that, we can face raising a child." Lyona's eyes shimmered with emotion. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple. Nothing about our relationship has been simple. But it has been worth it. Every challenge, every fight, every public stand. It brought us here. To this moment. To this choice. You really want this? I really want to build a family with you. Whether that family includes children or not, you're my home. But yes, I would love to see what we could create together. Not just in terms of laws and institutions, but in terms of a life. A small person who carries the best of both of us." Lyona was quiet for a long time, her crystal features reflecting the fading light. Finally, she smiled. "Then let's do it. Let's add one more impossible thing to the list of impossible things we've already accomplished." The medical facility at the Institute was state-of-the-art, equipped to handle the unique challenges of mixed-species reproduction. David held Lyona's hand as the Zilithan doctor reviewed the latest scans. "Everything looks excellent," Dr. Sethi said, her voice warm with professional satisfaction. "The fetus is developing perfectly. The human-Xylan genetic integration is proceeding exactly as predicted." David felt his heart swell. After months of genetic counseling, medical consultations, and careful monitoring, they were actually going to be parents. "Can you tell what traits the baby will have?" Lyona asked, her free hand resting on her slightly rounded belly. "Some," Dr. Sethi said. "The child will have your silver skin, Lady Lyona, but with a warmer tone from Captain Reyes. The eyes will be large like Zalon eyes, but with a more human shape and coloring. Height will likely fall between both species averages, but personality, intelligence, temperament, Those will develop over time, influenced by both genetics and environment. In other words, David said, our child will be uniquely themselves. Exactly, Dr. Sethes smiled. Just like every child, regardless of heritage. As they left the medical facility, they encountered a small crowd waiting outside. News of Lyona's pregnancy had spread quickly through the institute, and it seemed half the staff wanted to offer congratulations. This is historic, Commander Chun said, beaming. The first documented child of a legally recognized human-Xylan union. We're not the first mixed couple to have children, Lyona protested. There have been others. But you're the first whose child will be born into a galaxy that celebrates rather than condemns their existence, Princess Zara said, stepping forward from the crowd. That makes all the difference. The princess had remained a close ally and friend over the years, using her political influence to advance interspecies rights across the Xylon Confederation. Your child will grow up in a world you helped create, Princess Zara continued. A world where being both human and Xylon is seen as a gift rather than a burden. That's your legacy. That evening, alone in their quarters, David and Lyona sat together planning for the future. We need to think about names, David said. Something that works in both languages. And we need to decide where to raise them, Lyona added. The Institute is wonderful, but it's also very public. Every moment of our child's life would be documented, analyzed, held up as an example. You want privacy, David understood. You want our child to be able to just be a child, without the weight of representing anything. Is that selfish? Lyona asked. We've spent years being public symbols. Is it wrong to want something different for our child? It's not selfish. It's protective. It's parental. David pulled her closer. But wherever we raise them, whatever choices we make, our child will still be part of this larger story. We can't completely shield them from that. No, Lyona agreed. But we can make sure they know they're loved for who they are, not what they represent. We can give them the freedom to choose their own path, even if that path has nothing to do with interspecies relations or cultural integration. What if they want to be a crystal cultivator? David teased. Following in your family's traditional footsteps? Lyona laughed. Then we'll support them, even though it would be deeply ironic. Or what if they want to be a pilot, or a musician, or a chef? Then we'll support that too, Lyona said firmly. Our fight was for the right to love across species boundaries. But it was also for the right to choose. Our child should have that same right, to choose who they want to be, without being limited by expectations from either culture. David kissed her forehead. We're going to be good at this. The parenting thing. You sound very confident. I am. We've already faced down an entire society's prejudices. We've changed galactic law. We've built an institution from nothing. How hard can raising one small child be? Lyona's laughter was musical. Ask me that again in about 6 months when we're dealing with diaper changes and sleepless nights. Their daughter was born on a quiet morning as Zilithan's twin sons rose over the institute. She came into the world crying lustily, her voice strong and clear. She's perfect, the doctor said, placing the infant in Lyona's arms. David looked down at his daughter and felt his world shift. She had Lyona's silver skin, but warmed with peachy human undertones that made her glow. Her eyes, when they opened, were large and luminous, Xylon in shape but with human brown irises flecked with Xylon crystal clarity. Tiny fingers, each tipped with what might become either human nails or Xylon crystal growth, wrapped around his thumb with surprising strength. Hello, Kira, Lyona whispered, using the name they had chosen. It meant light in Zilithan and dark-haired in one human language. A perfect fusion, just like their daughter. Kira Reyes Thyleth, first child of a legally recognized human Xylan marriage, already demonstrating a healthy set of lungs and a firm grip on her father's heart. The first few months were challenging in ways David had never imagined. Kira needed a specialized diet that accommodated both human and Xylan nutritional requirements. Her sleep cycle didn't match either species' norms. She was sensitive to both the lighting levels humans preferred and the crystal harmonics that soothed Xylans. But she was also remarkable. She learned quickly, her eyes tracking movement earlier than human infants typically did. She responded to music from both cultures with equal delight. And she smiled, a gorgeous expression that lit up her unique features whenever she heard her parents' voices. "She's going to be brilliant," David said one night, watching Kira sleep in her specialized crib that adjusted lighting and temperature automatically. "She's going to be whatever she wants to be," Lyona corrected gently. "Brilliant or not, ambitious or content, a revolutionary or someone who just wants a quiet life, we'll love her the same." Word of Kira's birth spread quickly. Within weeks, they received requests from researchers wanting to study her development, journalists wanting to document her childhood, and politicians wanting to use her as a symbol for various causes. David and Lyona refused them all. "Our daughter is not a research subject or a political symbol," David stated firmly in the brief public statement they released. "She's a child who deserves the privacy and normalcy that all children should have. We ask that everyone respect that." But privacy was hard to maintain when you were the directors of the most prominent interspecies relations institute in the galaxy. People watched them constantly, noting every detail about how they raised Kira, what traditions they followed, what languages they spoke at home. "Maybe we should step down," Lyona said one evening after a particularly intrusive incident where a journalist had tried to photograph Kira through their window. "Find somewhere quiet where we can raise her without constant scrutiny." "Is that what you want?" David asked. Lyona looked torn. "I want our daughter to have a normal childhood. But I also believe in the work we're doing here. How do we balance both?" The answer came from an unexpected source. High Magistrate Corv, now retired, offered them use of his family's estate in the countryside. A sprawling property with crystal gardens, privacy, and enough distance from the institute to provide insulation from public attention. "My granddaughter tells me you're struggling with the attention," Corv said when he made the offer. "This estate has been in my family for generations. It's quiet, secure, and large enough that you could maintain both privacy and proximity to your work. Consider it compensation for the harm I caused you." After much discussion, they accepted. They maintained their positions at the institute but worked remotely several days a week, traveling to the main campus only when necessary. The estate became their haven, a place where Kira could grow up surrounded by both human and Xylan culture without being constantly observed. 3 years later, Kira Reyes Thyleth was 3 years old and already showing signs of being extraordinary. She spoke both English and Xylathan fluently, switching between them effortlessly. She could identify crystal harmonics by ear and match human musical pitches with equal skill. She was curious, empathetic, and possessed a charm that seemed to work on members of both species equally. She was also, David often thought, the most beautiful child in the galaxy. But he admitted he might be biased. "Daddy, why do I look different from other children?" Kira asked one afternoon as they walked through the crystal gardens. David felt his heart clench. They had known this question would come, but he still wasn't fully prepared for it. "You look different because you're special," he said carefully. "You have a mommy who is Xylan and a daddy who is human. That means you get to have the best parts of both. But the other children at playgroup, they look like their mommies or their daddies. I look like both and neither." David knelt down so he was at eye level with his daughter. "That's true. You're unique. There's no one else in the whole galaxy exactly like you. Is that good? Kira's large eyes, so like Lyona's but somehow completely her own, searched his face. It's wonderful. Being unique means you can see things other people can't. You understand both human and Xelan ways of thinking. You can be a bridge between two worlds. Like you and Mommy? Exactly like me and Mommy. But you and Mommy had to fight for people to let you love each other. Will I have to fight too? David felt emotions welling up. His 3-year-old daughter was already grappling with concepts that most adults struggle to understand. Maybe sometimes, he admitted honestly. But Mommy and I fought so that you wouldn't have to fight as much as we did. And every time someone like us stands up and says, love is more important than prejudice, it makes things a little easier for the next person. Kira thought about this for a moment. So I'm supposed to make things easier for someone else? Only if you want to. You're not required to be anything except yourself. You can choose to fight for change like Mommy and I did. Or you can choose to live a quiet life. Or you can choose something completely different. The important thing is that you get to choose. I choose ice cream, Kira announced, her child logic jumping to more immediate concerns. Can we get ice cream now? David laughed, the tension of the serious conversation dissolving. Yes, we can get ice cream now. As they walked toward the house, Kira's small hand in his, David reflected on how much the galaxy had changed and how much still needed to change. His daughter would face challenges he couldn't fully protect her from. But she would also have opportunities that wouldn't have existed without the stand he and Lyona had taken in that plaza 7 years ago. That evening, after Kira was asleep, David and Lyona sat together on their balcony, looking out over the crystal gardens that glowed softly in the twilight. She asked me today why she looks different, David said. What did you tell her? The truth. That she's unique. That she represents possibility. That she can choose her own path. Lyona leaned against him. Do you think we prepared her enough? For the reality of being the first. I think we're giving her what every child needs. Love, support, honesty, and the freedom to be herself. The rest she'll figure out as she goes. Just like we did. We changed the galaxy for her, Lyona said softly. Before she was even born, we changed it. And she'll change it even more, David predicted. Not because she has to, but because of who she is. Our daughter, who is both human and Xelan, who proves every single day that love can create something entirely new. They sat in comfortable silence, two people from different worlds who had built a life, a family, and a legacy simply by refusing to hide their love. Around them, the crystal gardens sang their evening harmonics while human wind chimes added their own melody. Two different sounds creating something beautiful together, just like their family, just like the future they were building. One choice, one stand, one moment of courage at a time. And somewhere in the house behind them, their daughter slept peacefully, unaware that she represented everything they had fought for. Proof that love could transcend any boundary, that families came in all forms, and that the future belonged to those brave enough to claim it. The end.